what I would say is,
obviously the number one issue that we hear about on the campaign trail, we're at 74,000 miles on the car since we started, and going around and talking and listening to people, and people in this district are suffering, and the economy and jobs is the priority number one, and that's that. And one of the frustrating things that we've dealt with for the last 6-8 months is being unrepresented, as the question goes to. And it's been very frustrating because as we've put the miles on the car, as we've gone around and talked to people, there is no voice down in Washington, D.C. I dealt with the situation, or spent some time over in Hornell with Alstom. What you're going to see in us is a philosophy of a government that's a limited federal government, but there's a proper role of the federal government when it comes to our national security and our infrastructure. And that type of spending we are going to advocate for, because I think that has long-term national security protection issues and also long-term return on our economic investment in our infrastructure. So the Alstom situation is, there was a contract situation that they lost out on because of some technicalities in the bidding process, and they didn't have a voice to turn to in Washington, D.C. to be a representative for them. And that's troublesome. But I will also say, probably the most frustrating thing that was brought to our attention on the campaign trail was the individuals, the young students that are graduating from high school that were going through the process of applying to our service academies. And I was greatly concerned to hear that because we didn't have a representative, that those individuals and their applications were potentially going to be delayed. Now, we reached out, and the president of the College, Joe Burke, does a great job heading up the committee that handles that. And I know that we worked out the details to make sure that those applications move forward, but for a few months there, it was in limbo, and it's frustrating. And those are real people that are being hurt because they don't have a voice in Washington, D.C. So the first thing we're going to have to do is obviously reestablish our constituent service when we get into business on November 3rd.
Thank you, Tom. The next question will be directed to Tom. It will come from Chad Rowley.
Well, sir, I wanted to say thank you, gentlemen, for coming out tonight as well. My question is, if elected, how would you vote on the current Bush tax cuts? Would you be more interested in extending them for everyone, realizing that it would cost an estimate of $700 billion, or only extend them to the working class, and why?
We have dealt with this issue many a time on the campaign trail, and we take the position that in America right now, we are taxing too much, and we don't support the picking and choosing of who to raise the taxes on. What I support is the extension of the tax rates at the levels that they are at. That means that the Bush tax rates would carry forward come January 1st. And fundamentally, the reason why is because we are focused 100% on the spending side of the ledger. We have to institutionally and organizationally change how we do business as a nation. We need to draw the line in the sand on the spending side to make sure that we're putting out and making sure that the debate is occurring on the issues of where we're going to cut and how we're going to cut. And that's what we have to focus our energy on. Now, I understand that some will want to engage in, well, this one should raise taxes on this group, that we should raise taxes on that group. My concern with that approach is, okay, 2% this year. Well, what about the top 4% wage earners next year? What about the top 10% the following year? It doesn't fundamentally address the issue, and that's the spending side of the ledger, and we have to institutionally and organizationally change how we do business.
Thank you very much. Question now goes to Matt.
I have profound disagreements with that. For starters, it's $700 billion this year, but it's $4 trillion in the next 10 years if we extend it for everybody. Now, we're $13 trillion in debt. $1 trillion of that is held by the Chinese, which means everybody in this audience and watching at home is currently owing Beijing $45,000. We have to start addressing that. I support the idea that we extend the tax cuts for those making less than $250,000. I think the middle class needs that to be able to continue purchasing and being viable members of our economy. But for people who are making over $250,000 a year, when I talk to them throughout the district, they say, you know what, it's 2%. I don't mind paying a little bit more to help out the little guy and make sure that we're not putting a tremendous burden on the American middle class. I mean, we need a strong middle class in this country for those 10% who are at the top to continue to be having a sound life. They need us to be able to buy their products. Henry Ford once said, we should be the best industrialist, is the person who makes the best quality product, the lowest possible price or paying the highest wages. Well, if our middle class can't buy those products because our country's so in debt and we don't have jobs anymore, it's got a serious problem on our hands. I don't want to see that burden be passed down to my children. I don't want us to have Beijing one day call up and say, where's our $1 trillion? And go, I have no idea. We can focus on the spending side of the ledger, but the Republicans who did come up with this tax plan in the first place were the ones who enacted the sunset provision for a reason. They realized it wasn't sustainable. I applaud them for that. I'd like to see their plan carried to its fruition in terms of people making over $250,000. The economy's not ready for the rest of it, people in the middle class, and I think that the president and people in Congress who looked at this have said, if we do this, it's another $700 billion to the deficit this year and $4 trillion over the next 10 years. And I don't know how you call yourself a fiscal conservative if you want to add another $4 trillion to a $14 trillion deficit.
Thank you very much. The next question will come from Julie Sherwood, who is the Director of Debate Services.
I would like to know if you support or oppose the new healthcare reform legislation, and what would you do, if anything, to change it after elected?
Yeah, I wouldn't have voted for it in Congress. I'm not going to vote to repeal it. I think to do so would be tossing the baby out with the bathwater, and here's why. A compromise is something in which every side hates the outcome. I mean, that's what we got. Everybody hates the outcome. But there are provisions within the outcome that we all agree upon. The first is that an insurance company can no longer deny you coverage based on a pre-existing condition. A cleft lip in the palate, type 1 diabetes. These are things that insurance companies consider to be a pre-existing condition. I think that's wrong. It's something you're born with. Insurance companies can't deny you your coverage based on the fact that you've paid into the system faithfully, but now you're being rolled into the ER and you need a quadruple bypass for your heart. It's going to cost $130,000. And suddenly some actuary in Omaha decides we don't want to spend it. They've honored their side of the contract, but we're going to get rid of theirs. And they deny you your coverage as you're on the operating table. That's wrong. It's worth keeping. We've extended coverage up to kids at the age of 26. If there's a parent in the audience, please just show a hand. Who wants to not have their child have health care? I didn't think so. I'm still waiting to meet the person who says I don't want them to have it. And we closed the donut hole for Medicare procedures. Now that's worth keeping. And the wonderful thing about our founding fathers is that they came up with this process called amending. It doesn't require us to repeal the bill outright. We can simply keep the things that we like, which we all agree on these 4 provisions, and we can get rid of the things that we don't like and fix it going forward. I think that's the sound, moderate, rational thing to do. We all agree that the previous system didn't work, so what I'd like to see going forward is a system that addresses costs, a system that quite frankly gets rid of the individual mandate. I don't think it's constitutional. I'd like to have a system in which insurance companies can sell their product across state lines. I think that'll substantially reduce costs. And an actual conversation about how we practice medicine. We need preventative medicine. We should be concerned with you before you develop type 2 diabetes, not when you're on dialysis. That's how we're actually going to lower costs in this country, and that's what I'd like to see out of the future healthcare reform bill, which I'd be proud to enact and sponsor the day I get the Congress.
All right, thank you, Matt. Should I ask that, just to keep you even going here, that we don't have applause between each of the questions. That same question now goes to Tom, please.
Yeah. When it comes to Obamacare, we do not support that legislation. We stand for the repeal of Obamacare. The issues that Matt is touching upon, the health insurance reform provisions that there's somewhat agreement on when we talk about pre-existing condition, affordability across state lines, and things of that nature. We support that type of reform. But I think what we have to do is we have to repeal it, because what's happened now, ladies and gentlemen, is that the health care bill has not done anything to address the fundamental problem with the health care industry, and that is health care costs. And I will tell you that what that bill does is that all it does is an insurance mandate, and mandates that there's the 30 million plus people that have to have insurance now, but it does nothing about costs. And it also puts a tremendous amount of burden on the private sector to carry the cost and pay for that expansion of the federal government. We are not a big federal government supporter. We come to you with our position of a limited federal government, one that will recognize the Constitution and live within the Constitution and legislate within the Constitution, and focus on the areas of a limited federal government that support national security, our infrastructure, and things of that nature. But fundamentally, we have to have the repeal process to put this debate back before the people. Because the debate has not been finished, and now that it's been adopted, no one is talking about it in Washington, D.C. And the fundamental issue is that the health care costs in America have to be addressed because it's killing private sector America.
All right, thank you, Tom.